Good morning, everybody, or the one or two people that may already be here. Let's do the sprinting thing one final time this week. I hope this will work. I hope I won't, surpass the weird StreamYard limit on streams during the stream and they'll just cut me off. They say no, but who knows with those kind of companies. So I hope you can hear and see me. We'll do the usual thing. I'll have some admin stuff to do during the first sprints, and then I'll do some writing during the second ones, and we'll see how much I can actually get done today. Yeah, as I said, no sprints tomorrow because I have a doctor's appointment at 8:45. So it doesn't really make sense to start sprints before that. So yeah, I did in fact record or re-record a video for the Siege of Burning Grass by Primi Mohamed, and it is currently uploading as we speak. So I'll have to edit like the video description and stuff. That's something I'll do during the first one, and then I will have, of course, I need to actually publish it, but I'm not sure if I should do this early in the morning or later today. It's one of those things that you need to find out over time, or I need to figure out. So that's the plan for today, for the first sprints, so to speak. Yeah. So let me know what you guys are planning to do during the sprints. Are you planning to read or just breakfast as usual, which is also a good idea. I mean, I'm already drinking tea, so there's that. Yeah, I mean, I'm in this weird position where I definitely have to sort of continue doing the stuff that I've planned, but the last couple of weeks, while doing the sprints, which I really enjoy, and they do get me do some things, have also kind of felt weird in that I'm still looking for a purpose again, I guess. Like the summer was so much like concerts everywhere, festivals, all that crazy shit, and now I'm like, so what am I doing? Sitting indoors because it's raining outside and basically doing nothing. And at the same time, I can see the numbers, like the subscriber numbers for my channel going down again. Like, I mean, obviously it doesn't really matter that much. They're always hovering around the 1420 number, and they were up to 24, and then they went down to 20 again, and then they went up to 23 or 4 again, and now they're down to 20 again. And every time I'm wondering, is it because YouTube does randomly, from time to time delete subscribers or like dead accounts, I guess, and that can be that, or am I doing something that is pissing people off? Which is not exactly a problem. Like I don't have a problem pissing people off. The question is, do I also find people that are still willing to listen to me at the same time? Or I know it's a weird thing. So that's something I'm trying to figure out. We'll see what a video on a Primi Mohamed book does. I suspect it won't make many people happy because, I mean, but you never know, right? I mean, the Talia Levin book on the Christian right did surprisingly well, but others where you think they might be a big deal don't go well at all. I don't know. YouTube is weird, is my point. And then at the same time, I also have to. I mean, I don't have to, but later today is the next part of the YouTube channel membership program thing, bootcamp. That's the word. So I don't know. I have to take there. I mean, I don't have to, but I'll probably sit in again. And they sent me an email. Hey, you still haven't started memberships. Are you still planning to do this? And now I feel pressured, and I'm like, I don't know. So that's something I'll have to deal with and figure out what I actually need to do to actually set up the first thing. And I mean, obviously, I need some graphic stuff for that, and maybe I'll just like set up the channel memberships for like $1 per month or whatever the minimum is that you can ask for, and let people just deal with that. So that's something I'll have to figure out, because then obviously if I need graphics, I have to ask someone if they are willing to do this and help me with it. Which is it's a whole other like issue, of course. But you know, what can you do? That's just the way these things go. And then I still want to continue with re-recording for the Mormonism video, and obviously I didn't get to that yesterday because I re-recorded the other thing, and recording more than one video per day is more stressful than you might think. I mean, I've done it before; it's definitely doable, but what with doing, the sprints in the morning and then going back, going to the gym, coming home, recording, and suddenly I don't feel energized enough to record a second video and be good about it. I guess that's more like the problem there. So yeah, I guess that's what I'll be doing during these sprints today. Obviously also go through comments, emails, all of that stuff. There is Pelgrane Press that are sending me more and more urgent emails. I should please back their new Trail of Cthulhu 2nd edition role-playing game. Something I'd love to do, but on the other hand, I have the 1st edition. I don't necessarily need the 2nd edition. Hey, Kadya. Hey, Chadya. How you doing? So they want money from me, and I'm trying to not fall into the trap of buying even more role-playing games. But it's weird. It's a weird day today, I guess. A weird Thursday. Although I did already fill out a creator survey for YouTube. They should be proud of me. Those are really interesting, because every time they're like, how inclusive is YouTube for creators? Is it inclusive for people of different genders, different skin colors? And I'm like, I don't know. But you'll never ask about people with disability, do you? That's that level of accessibility is something you don't even think about, and that's kind of interesting, but also kind of frustrating. Ooh, a day off. That's nice. Is it just because you have a day off, or is it another holiday that I have forgotten about because holidays in where I live don't happen anymore? Also, if it's a day off, why are you awake at 8? That shouldn't happen. No, I did start reading that Palo Alto History of California Capitalism and the World book yesterday, and it's a very, very good book. Makes me very angry. Who should pop up in the section on eugenics and race hygiene in Stanford in the 1920s, but the grandson of Brigham Young? I will never get rid of those Mormons, I guess. So yeah, seems he was researching eugenics in the 1920s. This the grandson of Brigham Young. So that's something new I learned, and yeah. Ooh, 3 hours is not that much in Dragonbone. If you're listening to it at one point at normal speed, that means you probably already have they left Naglimund yet? I guess, right? They must have with like 3. So you are liking it more this time round, and I assume because you have not DNF'd it again. I mean, I think it's a really good book. It is very, very slow at the beginning. And yes, Simon gets slightly more competent by now. I mean, he's still not, uber competent, but I guess, having constantly someone threatening your life does sort of help with that. Yeah. So you are continuing with what's the next one? Stone of Farewell is the next one? Yeah, right. Or you're taking a break from the whole Simon ordeal. Because I read them last year around this time, because I thought the final book would be coming out last year. Then it came out last week. No, this week. It came out on Tuesday. But since I'm currently not reading any fiction, I don't plan on starting it anytime now. I mean, I'm gonna start it at some point, because I made videos for the first 3 and the Heart of What Was Lost, so it just makes sense to also do the rest at some point. Just trying to, not lose track of the more important part, which is obviously the Sanderson thing, and all these people telling me that it's definitely high time I finally start reading Elantris. Which, yeah, definitely. But I'll finish Palo Alto first, and I guess I might finish it today, so I have time to read Elantris tomorrow and Saturday, and so here's the thing: like I found The Heart of What Was Lost, which is the bridging novel between the first series and the second series. I really, really enjoyed that one. That was much more focused than the first trilogy. It was slightly more violent, but it was much more focused and read much more. You could tell that Tad Williams has adapted his writing style or changed his writing style to what is more or maybe included things that have been added to the vocabulary of science fiction and fantasy since he published these books in the late 80s and early 90s. So there is, I don't want to call it grimdark because it's not, but he's certainly used or found techniques that are, people like George R. Martin or Joe Abercrombie are using, and has included them. And he wrote up a straight up sort of like war story, and it worked really well. And I'm like, wow, this is really good. So I have high hopes for the rest. I mean, I was I didn't want to start the trilogy last year with because I knew I would get through those first 3 books quickly, and then I had to wait for another year to get the final book, and I don't want to do that, so I'm going to read them all in one block, and it's going to happen sooner or later. But first to Sanderson. I mean, I don't expect Elantris to be anything, right? That's the point. It's I know Cleo has some views on the idea of disability representation and magic cures in there. I might have a different perspective on that, but who knows? But I'm always willing to give people grace for their debut novel. That's something that, I expect to be a bit rough around the edges. People need to get more confident with like what they can do with their language and so forth. So I am not going to do the, well, it's trash kind of thing, because I know a lot of people hate on Elantris on BookTube and BookTok and wherever, and I'm like, well, whatever. I'm sure no matter what it will be, I have read worse. I'm pretty sure of that. So I am willing to cut even Brandon Sanderson some slack here. All right, so shall we do this? And I'll finish uploading the video for Siege of Burning Grass and all the other stuff that I wanted to do for the next 45 minutes. And we'll talk again at 9 p.m. and not p.m., a.m. Gods. This stuff is difficult. It's too early for me. So let's do it that way, and I'll talk to you in 45. And I am back. Hello, everyone. How is everyone doing? All right, everybody. Hello, Apollo. How are you doing? No worries about oversleeping. I'm glad I haven't managed to do this yet with these sprints. Hello, Britain. Glad you could poke in before you go to sleep. I assume you are asleep by now. Hello, Jelly Z. How are you doing? As for Final Empire, yes, I would agree. It is not exactly, a masterpiece. It does do some very interesting things that I feel are sort of something that I feel are paradigmatic for what Brandon Sanderson does. And I think it's worth talking about them. But as a general novel, I am either not the target audience or it is not that good, or both. I mean, Warbreaker is the one that everyone says is really good and like a great standalone, and the other one is the novella, the Emperor's Soul. I think that one is the one that even people who don't like Sanderson often go like, well, this one is actually good. Yeah. I have never heard of The Devil Takes You Home, so I wouldn't know what to say about bad reviews. I know it can be somewhat cathartic to find out that other people hate the same book that you hate. I will not lie. When I read that recent review of Song of Kali by Dan Simmons, and someone else than me finally said that yes, this is fucking racist trash that he's writing, I felt vindicated a little bit. Until I went on like some discords and everyone was like, "No, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. It's the character, it's not the author." And I'm like, yeah, but if every book he writes is about racist pieces of shit and everything around it is also racist, maybe it's not just the character. But yeah, I get that. It's definitely cathartic. Yeah, as for Mistborn, I think there's interesting things to be seen with Sanderson. I think he was a bit ahead of the curve when it comes to ideas like progression fantasy and lit RPG in a lot of ways, and that he's one of the first people that really included three-dimensional combat in like their action scenes in a way that we haven't necessarily seen in older books. And he obviously very clearly and explicitly does it with Mistborn, where you have all these people flying around, pulling each other and pushing each other away from different parts of metal and all of that stuff, which reads like someone trying to write or describe like an early, I don't know, Quake 3 match in a fantasy world in a lot of ways. And you boost yourself somewhere, you jump somewhere else. And so I think it is very much the first time that, say, 3D shooters and 3D video games made their way into the language of fantasy, and I think that's notable. That's definitely notable, and you can even notice that when you read Wheel of Time. There's a switch when Sanderson takes over. The battle scenes suddenly feel very different because he has that different, more like three-dimensional approach where people are suddenly standing on stairs and shooting down or jumping down and doing all these things, and suddenly it feels more dynamic in that regard. And I can see how that is something that people that grow up playing video games feel more at home with, because suddenly the combat feels more like the thing that they experience when playing games as well. And I think that's, say that that's an important thing. I think that's interesting. It makes the science fiction and fantasy, or like written fiction in general, more variable, and gives authors more tools. The question is obviously what you do with that. And there, obviously, the jury is still out, or my jury, me being the one-man jury on Brandon Sanderson, is still out, because I got sidetracked by a Marxist history of California. Which, once again, I highly recommend. It's a really, really, really good book. The Palo Alto: A History of California, Capitalism, and the World. In that it looks at California, the Anglo-Saxon, or the Anglo-American settlement of California, the way that different forms of racist laws have always been in place and sort of like stratified California society in a way that is maybe not necessarily apparent to someone from the outside. How the way the gold rush, or the first like sort of like more engineer approach to gold processing in California then was exported into the world, and how that has, all of these elements, how they have created a culture that is very much the culture that has formed the 21st century through Silicon Valley. I think it's a really interesting book in that regard, and I highly recommend it. And also you might learn about a lot of like East Asian radicals that were, for one reason or another, allowed to hang out in Palo Alto and around Stanford University in the early 1920s, that were in fact very much advocating for blowing up the Emperor of Japan and other things like that. So that's a really interesting side bit in there as well. Well, Britain, it kind of depends on what you mean by how should politics be depicted. Are you saying like how should we describe the process of doing politics? That's a different thing from how should an author insert their own politics into a book, because there's a difference between writing a manifesto and writing just the notes for a parliament meeting. That, if you know what I mean. And every author has to find their own way and has to try figure out what they want to do, I guess. For example, The Siege of Burning Grass that I just finished and I just uploaded the video for, like, during the first sprints, is very political. And there we have the old tried and tested method of having two characters with very opposite viewpoints and worldviews and experiences arguing with each other for a long stretch of the novel. And that's certainly one way of doing it. For example, something that Ursula Le Guin kind of chose when it comes to gender politics in Left Hand of Darkness, just putting her main characters on a fucking ice shelf where they're about to die, and then they have to discuss gender politics, which it does work. And that's obviously ways of doing that are more radical, more aggressive, and so forth. But that's including politics more, or like political views and worldviews of the author, or discussing different worldviews. Whereas describing or depicting politics, then you probably have to look at, I don't know, what kind of books do that in a good way. I guess the Malazan Book of the Fallen does certainly depict imperial politics from the outside, without the author taking too much sort of like a side in there, and just depicting like the idea of power brokering and stuff like that. Which reminds me, I still want to read The Power Broker, but for some reason it is, as so often, region locked. So I need to find a way to get to The Power Broker, which is a book that is not fiction. It's nonfiction, but it's, I think, one of those like key nonfiction texts that are important to read. See, Britton, I don't necessarily agree with that. It kind of depends on the book, right? There are books where I think being very clear and being very explicit in your takes can be refreshing and can be invigorating, and sometimes you just want to have someone else say the thing that you've always thought, and that can be very, very empowering, especially if you are necessarily, the kind of person who is somewhat marginalized. So having that can be very helpful and very empowering. For example, there's a lot of like very clear advocacy. I would call it advocacy or anti-religious sentiment and advocacy for at least queerness in the for the lesbian and gay experience. Trans experience, obviously not, because we're talking about Richard K. Morgan here, but like in his Land Fit for Heroes series, that stuff is in your face as fuck, and I think that's important here, because if you have been victimized and have been suffering from the casual homophobia of the world and especially religious people for a long time, having a book where bigoted priests who are trying to who are in favor of the death penalty for homosexuality get murdered in brutal ways can be incredibly cathartic as well. So I think there a clear and straight up message is very helpful. If your book is about something very, very different and suddenly someone stands up and makes a speech in favor of anarchism, then maybe that's not the right place to do it. Yeah, but at that point, it's much more like a skill issue for the author, knowing what works in the tone of the book that you're trying to create. For example, years ago, I read the what's it called? Is it called the Dragon King trilogy? I keep forgetting. By Stephen R. Lawhead, and it's a really bad book. Don't get me wrong. I'm trying to find out what it's called. Now, Stephen R. Lawhead is a Christian, I assume evangelical Christian. I assume evangelical, but I can't. I would have to check which specific religious affiliation he has. Man, hard to find. I know I have them. I assume Audible has region locked them after I bought them, which, yeah, I guess we have to live with now. The first book is called In the Hall of the Dragon King, I think. I'll just use Goodreads. They might know. If they work. And there, like, he starts telling a fantasy, like very, very classic Tolkien-inspired kind of fantasy, which turns out to be just Christian propaganda after a while, which is interesting because, Tolkien's book is very Catholic, and even, Narnia is very Christian in what C.S. Lewis is doing, but it's still less blunt, I guess, than what Lawhead is doing. What's that trilogy called? Yeah, it's called The Dragon King. It's in the Hall of the Dragon King, The Warlords of Nin, and The Sword of the Flame. Sword and the Flame. I highly recommend not reading them. Yeah, Pullman is obviously. Although I have not finished Pullman, I just have read parts, and yeah, he's obviously very clear in what he wants to do. But with Lawhead, it's super interesting because he does tread sort of like the same paths as Tolkien and C.S. Lewis in a lot of ways. But then he introduces, and everyone is still worshipping the old gods and everything, and then he introduces this weird hermit who knows all about this one god, and he's basically Gandalf, but he's also John the Baptist, I guess. He's John the Baptist, Gandalf, who can also solve everything with divine power and miracles. And at that point, you don't need a fantasy story because it leaches out all the conflict and everything. It suddenly is just God doing God things, and that is really that kind of takes away a lot of the stuff that you could do, in fact, with a political message. And let's face it, Christian proselytizing is also a political message, just the same way that being radically atheist is a political message in that regard. But yeah, it's kind of hard to do. It can be done extremely well by people who are, well, generally competent authors. And I think the other part is, of course, that an author's political views will just always bleed into the world and into the stuff they're writing, just simply because they will preclude some choices for plot and character, or will make some choices for plot and character just more likely in a lot of ways, right? If you as a person are a raging homophobe, like say Orson Scott Card, chances of you having positive depictions of gay of queerness, of gay characters in your books are basically zero, because you're probably not able to completely overcome that personal prejudice. In the same way, for me, I doubt I would be able to write a very, very good, convincing Nazi in a positive role. Not that I want to, but even if I would try, I don't think I would be able to, because worldviews do sort of, up to a point, I don't want to say blinker, but they do sort of push our minds and thoughts into specific channels, and that's just like how it is. And no matter what, like even as a liberal, right? If you are like a very middle of the road kind of liberal person and try to see both sides to everything in a lot of ways, right? You'll probably have troubles coming up with convincing radical characters when it comes to radical politics, right? It's like writing a good anarchist means that you need to be able to empathize with anarchism. Writing a good Nazi, basically, a good Nazi character in the sense of like a believable Nazi character, means that you need to be able to empathize, or at least put yourself into that position. And that can be difficult. That takes a lot of hard work. And unless you have like a good reason to do that, you'll probably just like avoid doing that kind of stuff. Britain, I don't know if you'd like The Steel Remains. I think it's definitely a really, really good book in that it does the things that it sets out to do very well. The one thing that I'll say, though, is it does have very, very explicit sex scenes. That's something that Richard K. Morgan has always had. He's very, very graphic in his sex scenes. And in this book, a lot of them are gay sex scenes. So, and the goal there is to force a reaction from the reader. It's part of what he's doing with that book, is to piss off conservative readers that may be homophobic by forcing them to read like a 2-page gay sex scene per book, at least one of them, sometimes two. But beyond that, it's basically like an early Joe Abercrombie novel, but on a lot of steroids. It's just like very, very action-packed, very rage-filled, and it leaves out all the irony. It plays everything straight. Everyone is angry because the world is shit, and it goes some very, very dark places. I think it does so extremely well, and I'm really annoyed that Richard K. Morgan fell down that British turf hole, but what can you do? No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it shouldn't be too bad. I haven't read the sex scenes in Black Leopard, Red Wolf, obviously, because I haven't read the books yet. But looking at what he does, what Mullen James does in his realist fiction or literary fiction or whatever you want to call it, his non-fantasy books, nah, you shouldn't. You should be all right. You've read like Cormac McCarthy. You've read. You should be right. I think it was way more shocking to a lot of people growing up on epic fantasy, and maybe having read Game of Thrones at that point. But I mean, is there gay sex in Game of Thrones that I have forgotten about? Because I think, at least for the first couple of books, the first 3 books, I think it's all heterosex when there are sex scenes, mostly involving very young girls, and maybe one lesbian sex scene, but I don't think even that. It's just like straight. So I guess getting queer sex just felt different when the book came out in, like, I don't know, 2005 or 6 or whenever that first one came out. I have not read that, Ori. Yes, there is queer sex in A Brief History of 7 Killings. I'm pretty sure there was. Yes, there is. That's an interesting typo there, Chadia. But yeah. So yes, to kind of tie this back down, I think like politics suffuse every novel in one way or another. Making clear declarations takes a specific skill with the author, and obviously always comes with the risk that your readers may misunderstand you. I mean, you can always go and read, like, what's it called, Starship Troopers, and try to figure out what Hainan was actually saying, and that's one of those risks that you have as an author, which is kind of where the death of the author kind of thing comes in. Is like you can't predict what people will read into your book. And I can see that if people care very much about a specific political message, that they might be tempted into making it as clear as possible to avoid any misunderstandings. So I think that's sort of like where the danger lies, that sometimes messages are very, very blunt in case someone, may misconstrue what you're doing, which is, always the danger if you're too subtle there. Hey, Breaking Spines. I feel like Lovecraft's Dreamlands book stuff is better than his other stuff. I prefer his Dreamland stories in a way. And not only because it has the Cats of Ulthar, which is objectively a really, really funny story that most of the way, I'm sure there's some racism in there that I have forgotten right now because it's been years since I read it, but might be a story that both Chadia and Cleo, I should tell Cleo about that one. If she hasn't read it yet, I assume it's something that she might be interested in. Well, the Cats of Ulthar are one of the great gifts of Lovecraft to the general world of genre fiction, I would say. because I'm pretty sure I've encountered them in a different story by a different author as well that was not Night in the Lonesome October. But I can't remember which one it was. So yeah, I'm gonna try and actually write something now for the next 45 minutes before I head off to the gym. No, that's a very specific hole that we don't want to get into here. It does happen way too often, Britain, and there's certainly something to be said about it. But yeah, not during sprints. That's a topic for a nuanced discussion, and probably not one that I'm qualified to have. But yeah, that's the things. Like I have not read those stories, but it sounds like something I might be interested in reading just to find out what it does. So I'll put it on the list of stuff that I'll hopefully. Yeah, exactly, Britain. That's the point. It's like I'm not qualified to talk about this too much. I mean, I can obviously always mansplain shit, but yeah, it's a difficult topic and requires much more sort of like nuance that I'm usually than I'm used to giving, I guess. I'll definitely try and check them out, Ori. Definitely. Back to Ostenard. Sounds good, Chadia, because there the sexual problems only happen in book 3, I think. And good night, Britain. I'm sure it's super late for you. Progress on the Mormon video is not good because I had to re-record the video on the Siege of Burning Grass, but I'll try to get to it today and do the Joseph Smith part today. So that's the goal for today, to actually continue there with that work. I get sidetracked by the wonderful Palo Alto by Malcolm Harris, which I recommend you read if you are interested in why the world is fucked today. So yeah, see you at 10:15. And I am back, as promised. I did indeed manage to write some. How about you guys? Fuck! Hello, Nexi, and well, first of all, I'm happy you get that American citizenship. That sounds like a huge step, especially in the current climate. So I'm glad it seems to work for you. And Norway is a pretty cool country as well, so that sounds good. Oh, nice. Cool. That sounds fun, Apollo. That sounds really cool. Um, so yeah, I did in fact manage to do a little bit of writing, which is sometimes it takes a while for me to sort of like actually get into the whole like getting words out kind of part of the thing. But at least I managed to write a couple of sentences, slowly easing myself through this specific part of the story, I guess. And scrolled through upcoming fantasy and science fiction releases and found out there is a new Guy Gavriel Kane novel coming out next May, it seems. Which reminds me that I need to read some more of his older books because I still haven't progressed beyond Tigana. It does sort of feel slightly like a routine at this point. At least somewhat. It still takes a while for me to sort of get to it, and I think that's maybe something I need to figure out how to sort of speed up the the part of getting to actually putting down words before the usual stuff, getting procrastinating, sidetracking, all of that stuff. But I'm getting there, so that's a good thing, I think. The Goodreads review system, I don't know exactly what you mean. If you mean like the star rating stuff, I'm not a huge fan of it. It's I don't think it does particularly well because I in general I feel like rating for art is a really bad idea. But I kind of understand how it kind of came to this, obviously through product ratings and so forth. And I feel like product reviews and product ratings make a lot of sense. If I want to buy, a new washing machine or whatever, having people's experience with that specific model and having a simplified sort of like star rating does work fairly well because there's some very clear conditions that you need to meet to have like 5-star, 4-star, whatever. You can quantify that kind of experience fairly well, but it's very difficult to quantify the experience. I would say it's impossible to quantify the experience and qualities of a piece of art, whether it's music, a movie, or a book. So having a star rating is very counterproductive. I kind of understand that in the world that we live right now, having star ratings are a shorthand for a lot of people to figure out where to spend their money. Capitalists obviously love the idea of quantifying everything, so I get why we have it. I personally rarely use it. I rarely review stuff on on Goodreads in general. I rarely use it. I sometimes use it when there's like a book that I recently. It was like a nonfiction kind of thing that came from one of those like really predatory pseudo academic presses. And there I gave like a 1-star rating because the book had no ratings whatsoever on Goodreads until that point. So I decided to give it like a 1-star because you can't give 0 stars, right? You can only give like 1 star, and wrote a short review explaining that it is in fact that kind of book and should not be used as academic source because it does in fact have a lot of like wrong information in it, being that kind of pay to publish it's not a vanity press. It's like these very predatory kind of presses that exist on the outside of academia. So I figured they're giving like a one-star review works because, once again, the thing that I'm rating there and reviewing there is something that can be more or less objectively proven. But for a novel, it's very difficult. On the other hand, I kind of see why, authors and publishers rely on having those good, those 5-star and 4-star ratings, because it does, unfortunately, very much translate into sales in a lot of cases. So they kind of need it, and I sometimes feel bad for not doing that, because if I like a book, I want other people to hear about it, but just giving it 5 stars and hoping for the best feels wrong. When it comes to reviews, it's difficult. I mean, it kind of depends on. I've been writing music reviews for like years over the years, and it's very easy to kind of fall into like a routine and just use a bunch of like routine phrases every time you talk about something. So writing a good review in that regard is also very difficult, and I think it takes us a lot of skill that most people don't have. And even if you have the skill to do that kind of writing, if you do enough of these reviews, if you write 1, 2, 3, 4 book reviews per month, if you write 1, 2, 3, 4 music reviews, album reviews per month or per week or whatever, it's easy to kind of fall into that, and it kind of all starts to blur. So I don't necessarily see the use of that, or like I see a lot of dangers with it. All right, see you around, Apollo. And I hope that that came close to what your question was there, Breaking Spines. So yeah, I do. I'm skeptical of the whole Goodreads thing. The other part is, of course, that with Goodreads, in particular, this being an open platform and so forth, there's no verification. People do, in fact, know, have read the book that they're rating and so forth, which we've obviously seen both in like positive and negative ideas of like review bombing and so forth. It's the kind of thing that you see on all kind of platforms that are like that. Now, on the other hand, I don't want anyone. I don't want like to have like Amazon to have even more data where I can only review a book if I bought it through Amazon, and they have like they have like on products that are like a verified buy on a reviews kind of thing. That's counterproductive as well. I just don't know what to do there. I feel like the whole idea of reviews, trusting reviews of people that you don't also like know in general, I think as a metric of what to buy or not to buy sounds difficult. I mean, I said like the general thing, like what I've learned over the years, like I feel like with art critics or like reviews for movies, music, books, whatever. Okay, yeah, that's an interesting take of like doing that. But here's the thing: do you rate your stuff on Goodreads, or do you have like a sort of like a spreadsheet or whatever at home where you write where you rate your stuff, so you can just like look it up? Because once you do that on on like a public platform, there is that additional sort of like dimension of someone else, of your personal sort of like enjoyment impacting the book at large, which I think is, we don't necessarily think about that, I guess, that there is a level of power there that we have. It's obviously minuscule, but it's still there. But yeah, I guess I'll go to the gym now and see how that goes. And I'll see you all hopefully on Monday if I figure out how to stream by then. But I'll try to set up the stream much earlier than usual, so you can find out on Sunday whether I will be sprinting on Monday and whether I figured out how to use OBS. Yeah, I mean, the 20-point scale is a much better one there. I agree. So yeah, as I said, no sprints tomorrow because I'll be at the doctor's office, and then I'll be hopefully back on Monday. I just uploaded and published the video for the Siege of Burning Grass if anyone's interested, and maybe I'll manage to have another video out before the weekend is over. We will have to find out about that over the next day or two. So yeah, thanks everyone for hanging out. It does help me as well. So yeah, good job, everybody.